I welcome into Check the Mike draft special once again. I got Mike Renner back. Mike, you were our first guest on our draft special. I think it was last month, and so welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me. Excited to get another invite back.
Yeah, you are. You're one of the top guys here. When you show up, people they reminisce the PFF days. You and Austin, your tailgate show. It's a little nostalgia, even though that was just a couple of years ago. But people they enjoy your takes, Mike.
Well, I don't get to talk draft much. I mean, truly, I still watch. I don't get to watch as in depth, but I also I watch. I don't watch as much because I have no outlet to talk about it. Like I can watch
Yeah.
all I want, but then I don't get to discuss with anyone. So it's kind of it's nice to have this outlet to be able to get stuff off my chest that I've been holding in.
Oh, that's good. So that's another reason why we like to have you back. Before we get going, tell everybody pushing the pile and where they can see all your stuff over at CBS.
Yeah, Push the Pile, me and Kyle Long. We do it Monday through Thursday. It's 9:30 a.m. Eastern each of those days on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Renner _. So, yeah, check me out.
As I said the last time around, Monday especially, you finish Check the Mic right around 9:30, 9:45. Click right over to Pushing the Pile. It's just a beautiful Monday morning of football. So that's the way to do it. Last time around, we talked quarterbacks, top fives. We talked a little Travis Hunter. I want to talk offense and defense, non-quarterback position. So we're going to start offensive playmakers. Going to kind of keep it broad. Let's start with how does this class look as far as general playmakers, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, high level? How is the class? Then we'll get into some of the players at each position.
So I think wide receiver, it's very thin. There's only two guys right now I'd call first rounders. They're just like first round grade. There will be, I think, more first rounds when it's all said and done, and then it also depends on what you consider Travis Hunter to be. Is he a corner? Is he a wide receiver? Because he's a first rounder at either, in my opinion. But if you consider him wide receiver, then that's three. But you have Tetairoa McMillan out of Arizona. You have Luther Burden out of Missouri. And then, those are the guys you want in this class. And I think they'll go pretty high because of that, because there's not really a great second wave. And there's not going to be that, what I was talking about, how the top of the second to the mid second, you can still find number one type of wide receivers pretty consistently. I don't think that's going to be the case in this year's class. I just think it's thin. So now a strong position. That's part of the reason why I think the class as a whole is kind of weak, because usually wide receivers super deep. Other positions like O-line are usually deep. They're just thin this year compared to year-on-year classes. So that's that. Running back, I think it's very deep. You have a top-end guy in Ashton Jenty who's like a real deal, could go top 10 in this year's class. Like he is about as good a running back prospect as I've seen coming out. And I think even when you compare him to someone like Bijan Robinson, I think he runs a little bit more physical and has even some, his vision is insanely good and his hands are awesome as well. So there's no weaknesses to this guy's game. Truly, he is a special running back prospect. So you have him at the top, but then you have this insane depth in this class throughout day two. I'm going to have a lot of guys with second and third rounder sort of projections in this running back class. So it's a really good year. Because of that, I think after Jenty, I'm not taking any guy in the top 50 because of that, just because after that, if it's like a Marion Hampton or if it's someone like Ollie Gordon or who's kind of fallen off this year, but it's just deep in that the second running back I don't want to draft. I want to draft the eighth running back, because to me, there's not a big difference in this year's class. There's just a lot of guys I like. So running back's very good. Tight end, there's no one close to Brock Bowers. In my opinion, he was, different dude. And you're seeing that obviously on the football field. And even, I don't think there's even the top of the class, whether it's Colson Loveland or Tyler Warren, who are two kind of different types of tight ends. One's Loveland, more your route runner, Warren, more your inline, just red zone, contested catch guy, but both very good at their respective. I'm not sure I'm calling either a surefire first rounder. I think both would be very good at the next level, but I don't even think either are approaching Dalton Kincaid level of prospect. So good prospects, but more depth in that class, that there are guys probably in the second tier of tight end prospects that I think will be talented players that could end up starting at the next level. So I could see those guys that I mentioned going first round, but there will be guys on day two who maybe even outproduce them when it's all said and done. So those kind of high levels, all those classes. Again, wide receiver really drags it down, but I think running back and tight end, there are players to be had.
Yeah, I want to get into the receivers because what you're saying here, Mike, like when we go back and look at last year's class, 14 offensive players off the board, then Latu comes off the board. Last year felt like deep at high value positions, right? There was QBs to be had, there was receivers, there were tackles, and then a team like the Colts gets Latu, and a team like the Rams gets Jared Verse. Those guys are top 10 players in other years, perhaps in this type of draft class. Mm-hmm. It feels like the depth is just worse at the wrong positions, essentially receiver, tackle, and it's higher at the positions that aren't as important, essentially running back, tight end, and a few others.
100%. I think, and that's why I said I think we still get a couple of those wide receivers going highly, but I don't think either McMillan or Burden are as good a prospects as even Rome Odunze, who came off the board as your third wide receiver last year. So it's just weaker there, and then the positions where maybe it is deep, there's not like surefire stuff. So I think edge is pretty deep, but a lot of the guys at the top are kind of boomer bust-ish prospects. So even the stronger sort of positional classes don't necessarily have the blue chippers at the top. So it's a down year. I think everyone's been saying it, but I'll just echo the sentiments that I think it's a little bit of a down year as far as just overall talent, especially when you compare to last year. I thought last year was unique. This year, you're going to have to do your homework as a scout.
So Tetairoa, McMillan, Luther Burden, those are the only two first rounders for you? I mean, remember last year's discussion was like, hey, couple high-end receivers and then receivers 4 through 12 or 13, you might actually get somebody, including your guy, Ladd McConkey. Weren't you really high on Ladd McConkey last year? And you're seeing that. Like, you were able to get those guys late first and into the second round.
Yeah, and I think even outside the top 3 last year, I thought there was like a clear delineation of like those 3, just in terms of certainty. And obviously we're seeing like other guys outside of that top 3 be nasty as rookies, but it's like those top 3, you knew they were going to be darn good NFL players. And Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, like they happened right out the gate. But even after that, I thought there were guys who were so intriguing that I had more first round grades. I had Adonai Mitchell, I had Brian Thomas Jr., and I had Ladd McConkey all in my top 26 on the board last year. There's not even that second tier this year. I think the top end guys in this class, I think like McMillan and Burden, they're closer to me to like a Adonai Mitchell, to a Brian Thomas. Like they would have been more in that range, like 15 to 20 on the board if they were coming out last year. And then there's not even those guys after them that are like, okay, they're still darn good wide receivers. We're still going to go to bat in the first round. Everyone after in this class is either like kind of a role player or just a guy who's fine as like a number one-ish type of wide receiver at the collegiate level that has some flaws to their game that I'm not taking in the first round. And I'm waiting until, probably mid to later second to even take some of the next receivers off the board in this class.
You mentioned a couple of the tight ends, Tyler Warren from Penn State. Of course, he's starting to get Heisman hype because of how he's used at Penn State on direct snaps, throwing the ball, running the ball, catching it, blocking in line. He's doing it all. And then there's Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green, who's having one of the best tight end seasons of all time, maybe the best tight end season of all time. Are those guys both in the mix to perhaps be first rounders?
I don't see it with Fannin. He's just now he does block for a smaller guy, but he is small, man. I need to know what he looks like. He looks smaller than like Najee Harris, right? He looks a lot smaller than some running backs in the NFL. And I might even like, with how he runs with the ball in his hands, I might even give him some snaps in the backfield once he gets to the next level, but I just don't see him being a real tight end. And so because of that, I love what he does with the ball in his hands, but he's not even the most fluid of undersized tight ends, right? He's like, he couldn't pass for a wide receiver. And I think that worries me. If a guy's already 225, 230 pounds, whatever he is, like that far undersized, well, he better be able to double up and look like a wide receiver. And I don't even think he can necessarily do that at the next level, even if he gets force-fed a lot in that Bowling Green offense because he's so good with the ball in his hands. So I don't think he gets into that mix, but I do think he's probably a day 2 type of tight end. Warren, I'm not sure either, just because, gun to my head, I think he runs like a 4.7. I just don't think he's fast. And at the tight end position in the NFL, we saw Michael Mayer not even go in the first round when he didn't run that fast. So it's difficult to get. Just teams aren't gonna, unless you have speed to your game. Teams aren't willing to pull the trigger on tight ends that highly anymore. So uh, he may go in the first round just because it's a weak class, and there's maybe some teams at the back end of the first round who need one. But I think Loveland's the only guy where I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I can see myself willing to take that guy in the first round.
All right, last part on the playmakers here. You mentioned Ashton Jenty, where he stands as far as running back prospects. Is he the best? Is he up there with Bijan? Is he up there with Saquon Barkley as a prospect? And are you ready for the discourse? Are you ready for Ashton Jenty coming in to save the Dallas Cowboys as a top 10 pick? Are we ready for that?
I'm so ready because I've also like swung pretty far back to I might take a running back highly, especially in this year's class. You're not passing on what you were passing on maybe say a year ago. If you're drafting a running back in the top 15, you may be passing on a guy who's a massive project for you. And I think I look at the NFL game today and you see what a Derrick Henry can do for the Ravens offense. You see what guys can do when every team's base defense now is a light box. There's no teams anymore that are cover 3 base that are trying to stop the run first. Everyone's trying to stop the pass first. So a guy that can continually change that calculus for you, I think is still valuable. Is it top 10? Maybe not, depending on who's on the board there, but it could be very easily, just like from my perspective, it could be by the teens in this year's class. So yeah, if the Cowboys get a top 5 pick and take another running back, we'll question that pretty heavily. But if someone wants to, if you're the Bengals and you want to draft him in the mid-teens, if he's on the board for you, I'm not really going to bat an eye for that because of what it could do to open up things for Joe Burrow and company, or another offense like that.
Yeah, I'm not fully back that way yet, Mike, but I'm more open. I'm more open to the discussion. Now that we're not at PFF, we're not under contractual obligation to hate running backs anymore.
But I think we changed the game, but like the game changed from basically analytics companies, like because of what we were saying that the running game, you don't necessarily have to worry about his defense. To stop the run the ball isn't your past success anymore in the NFL. Look at the Ravens. They literally are the best rushing team in the NFL, the best run defense in the NFL. Why do they have so many losses? It's like that is not necessarily the formula. You have to have a pass defense first, and you have to pass the ball as well. So everyone has adjusted that. Everyone, like we're reaching this zenith where running games and passing games are nearing towards an equal EPA per play because of how defenses are adjusting to put all the resources towards stopping the pass. And so when that's the case, when it reaches that point where the rushing and passing EPA per play is kind of equal, well, that then makes running backs all the more valuable.
All right, Mike, let's talk trenches a little bit. O-line, D-line, always respected your evaluation. Still do when it comes to offensive and defensive linemen. You said, let's start with O-line. Maybe not the deepest class compared to last year, especially at tackle. Let's stay broad. Top 3 offensive linemen, and how does it look as far as tackles and interior O-line for this year?
Yeah, it's tough because, especially when last year was truly the best offensive line class I've ever scouted. And not only for tackles, but interior as well. This year, there's two first-round grades in the entire offensive line class. Kelvin Banks, probably my top offensive lineman, left tackle for Texas. Will Campbell, left tackle for LSU. But even if you're like comparing those guys year on year to prospects in the past, I think they are, what was the year, like Charles Cross level prospect. Charles Cross had top OT in that year's class, but not Penei Sewell, not Andrew Thomas, who I had OT in that year's class, not any of those guys, even Tristan Wirfs, who had OT2 in that year's class. It's like they're still flaws, or they're still not reaching that level of performance to get me excited about them. But so those are my 1 and 2. Still think darn good players. Still expect them to go very highly because of what we're talking about. The fact that if you pass on one of those, you ain't getting another one. It's a thin tackle class. So those are 1 and 2. And then my third is not actually a tackle. It's Donovan Jackson, the Ohio State guard. I haven't seen a ton of hype for him. I'm a little surprised. I think he's maybe not necessarily a plug and play high end starter. No one is in this class. I don't even have a first round grade on him either. But I just watched this guy move at the guard position. I definitely don't want you to move a tackle when he played Penn State, because that was the first game he ever played a tackle against Abdul, and it was horrible. But when he at guard on the interior, he's so powerful and can generate power, through how you want someone to generate power. Strong, just upper body, but also can move people with hip explosion, get off the line of scrimmage, reacts like an athlete. And I think you've seen enough progression from him now in 3 years as a starter that I feel good about that guy being a starting caliber guard at the next level, with tools to end up being a Pro Bowl, All-Pro caliber if he ends up with the right O-line coach. So those are my top three. Like I said, only 2 first rounders. And after that, it's really slim pickings. I will highlight 2 guys, though, that I really, really like. They're just like tiny for their respective positions. One is Charles Grant, the William & Mary left tackle, small school guy. He's like barely scraping 300 pounds. He needs to get so much stronger, but has natural athleticism that you cannot teach, natural fluidity you can't teach. And then Parker Brailsford, the center for Alabama, another guy who's like 280 max. And he was listed at 290, but he's not 290. He doesn't look 290 at all. But reminds me a little bit of Tyler Linderbaum, where just once he gets big enough, like once he gets strong enough, you just see it. He will be a good center at the next level. Just has to keep putting on mass. But he's still young. He's a redshirt sophomore, so he may not even come out.
It's a good call on Donovan Jackson at Ohio State. I did watch him kick out and try to block Abdul Carter. I actually came away thinking it had more to do with Carter jumping the snap and getting incredible jumps in that game, more so than Jackson. Certainly had some issues
like
playing.
A guard.
Yeah, I mean, he did. But it felt more like a win for Carter than a loss for Jackson in that particular game.
Yes.
How about D-line? I mean, you mentioned Abdul Carter. I texted you early in the season. He's a linebacker conversion. I said, I don't know if I'm ready for him yet as a true edge, but he looks like he's coming on. Do you have a top 3 D lineman list that we could talk about? And then we'll maybe talk about some of the depth at both edge and on the interior.
I do. I think Abdul Carter's one. I think he's the best edge rusher. I just think I see an athlete like that, and he reminds me, I mean, him and Chop Robinson are similar caliber, similar like tiers of athlete. He feels just a little bit more powerful than even Robinson did coming out, and a little bit more fluid. Robinson got a little herky-jerky at times, but like you're seeing Robinson at the next level already being, probably after Jared Verse, the second most productive rookie pass rusher, because of just what athletes at that level can do in modern NFL schemes and modern NFL blitzes, whether it's stunting, slanting, whatnot. There's such a problem. And so Abdul Carter, it's like maybe he's not refined yet, but he can be such a problem in the right scheme, just because you can't get hands on him when a guy's athletic. So big fan of his game. After that, I think Mason Graham, the Michigan DT, is next on my list. Those are the 2 guys who it's like they'll be good. After those 2, no one I really feel confident saying for sure is going to make it at the next level as either edge or defensive interior guy. I don't think anyone's reached that caliber of prospect, but those 2 will be high-end productive players at the next level. I feel very confident saying that. Graham on the interior, I don't think he's quite, the power that we saw from Jalen Carter, or quite the quicks we saw from Quinnen Williams, your 2 probably best DT prospects of the past half decade. But I think he's a nice blend of the 2, and already pretty refined for just a junior coming out. And so that's a guy that, you need a DT. He's versatile. Any position on the interior, draft him. Just be happy you got him. After that, third one's really up in the air, even for me right now. Like I think it'll probably change between now and draft day, truthfully. But Michael Williams, the Georgia defensive end, is probably the guy I'm going right now, just because of how freaky he is and just that combination that he has. It's like he's not there yet, but it's very easy to see him getting there. And I think even compared to Trayvon Walker and him coming out of Georgia, I like Michael Williams' tools better in how they'll translate to the NFL, because you see the lateral twitch. I think with Trayvon Walker, what was always missing from his game was his ability to react and kind of shed inside, outside. He had to go through guys consistently. And that's, you've seen him win like that at the NFL, but it's not a consistent way to win. you have to keep them honest, and not just be able to sit down on you consistently. And Mike Williams, I think, can. Now, he's not refined, but he's got super long arms. He's super twitchy, and he's 265 pounds. So he's not just, he's not one of these lighter guys. He can really be a versatile piece to your defense. So those are my top three. I think all three are going to be top 10 picks, I'll say. But I think this defensive line class, you're going to see a ton of different orders when it's all said and done with how these guys shake out.
Yeah, I think those, the top two, Abdul, I don't know if we'll get to a full consensus on him, but I think most people will see him as a top 10. Mason Graham, I wondered about his arm length and maybe some of the basic measurables that come out if those end up hurting him, but the dude can play. Michael Williams is interesting. I think Nate Tice may have been earliest on him, calling Williams his best player. I'm kind of with you as like a more polished, better version of Trayvon Walker with similar level of freakiness when it comes to length and movement skills and everything.
Yeah, I don't know if he runs 4.51, and Walker was weird because I honestly thought that his best, like he looked at his best when he was in space moving, as opposed to like in a tight quarters moving, which, it's
we saw the fumble return a couple weeks ago against the Eagles. He looked incredible. He's like Miles Jack, like put that dude at running back.
Well, I said after seeing that, I would genuinely consider moving him to tight end. I don't know what his hands are like, but that ability it doesn't help at all with rushing the passer, right? Like what he was doing is not weaving in and out like that. It can help a little bit. Like that at tight end to me could be special, and especially at his size with his length. I don't know. I'm just intrigued. I'm surprised that we've never seen him there at any point. Like even like a JJ Watt role, toss him up, went up at the goal line. I think he could do
try a
something
few
nice
snaps.
now. Yeah,
it's funny because the first couple of years when the Jags would drop him into coverage every now and then, he'd make a few plays in coverage where I was impressed. I'm not moving him to linebacker, but I've been most impressed with Trayvon Walker of the Jags in space and carrying a football rather than rushing the passer so far. There's so many other names, though. This does feel like the depth at edge and defensive line, when you talk about maybe mid to late first round, second rounders, feels way deeper than all of the other positions that we've discussed today. Would you agree with that?
100%. I actually, the depth at edge might be one of the deepest when all said and done. Now it depends on who declares and who comes back, but there's more guys who I'm like, man, I'd love to have that guy in the second round that I can never remember. And I don't love second round edges, but I think this class has a number of guys that I'm interested in. The one guy I keep going back to that I'm like, man, I want to put him in the first round based off his tape, but it's Central Arkansas tape. And he's going against
Why do we keep having a celebration in your background there too?
Oh, is that what I'm doing with my hands?
I hope so.
We're just having technical issues galore.
No, those aren't issues. Those are features, not bugs.
Those are features. So I'm celebrating David Walker, the Central Arkansas defensive end.
Yes.
Because you watch the tape and it's just about as dominant as it can get. And I'll tell a story about the one rep that sold me. Because it's just him tracking backside of outside zone. But his defensive tackle either gets backdoored or like his defensive tackle is running on the backside of outside zone and kind of like is actually going like towards him as Walker's coming in. And they're kind of moving towards each other at about the same speed. And David Walker, they hit shoulder to shoulder. Defensive tackle crumples to the ground, and David Walker like keeps going as if he didn't even feel that he just hit his own teammate. Like the level of power that this guy just has in his frame is so outstanding on tape that I just need to see what it looks like against a real offensive tackler. I need to see what it looks like against, I don't know, who's going to face the senior role, Ariante Ursary or whatever. Like, give him against some reps against a real tackle. But just from what I've seen on tape, I think he could be a first rounder from Central Arkansas. But we'll see. It's hard to really compare, though, when you're watching a guy and his level of competition.
You think he's got that speed to power that you're looking for, or just strength? Because he's kind of built like a bowling ball the way he's running around out there.
He's kind of like a Brandon Graham build, and I think that's kind of
that's
a good you get from at the next level.
Yeah, I like that a lot. You don't always get that Central Arkansas hype because he's stayed there too. He's had multiple productive seasons there in the portal era. right? I mean, that's a guy that if he's hitting the portal is probably one of the top edges for SEC teams to be looking at. And he stayed at Central Arkansas and has been extremely productive there.
Yeah, I mean, Jared Verse, he came from Albany, and then stock went through the roof. I just, David Walker, I don't know who gave him the advice, and obviously maybe he's just loyal, but if he was doing what he's doing right now, or even close to, whether it's in the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, any major conference, that guy would be a first rounder.
Any other names to know? Because I watch Ole Miss. I think Walter Nolan. Do you think Walter Nolan could be the next guy that sneaks up into the top 10 to 15? Maybe.
I think he could. Right now, him and Mason Graham's DT1 for me, Deion Walker, the Kentucky DT is DT2, and then Walter Nolan's DT3 for me. I don't know about top 10, but maybe because if it's not a good class, draft through the trenches, right? You'll probably see all DTs, DNs, and OTs in the top 10. And maybe a wide receiver, maybe one wide receiver sneaks in there. The other one probably goes right outside the top 10. But if it's not a good class, you might as well try to put some money in the bank in the trenches. And so Nolan's, in terms of just sheer explosiveness, probably more so than even Graham, more so than even Walker. Like, he can get off the line of scrimmage and get into an offensive lineman's pads and really reset. So still developing, still probably not, but he's only a junior, so DTs usually come out older than edges on the whole. So if he does declare, I think you can bank on him developing even more than your average DT prospect.
That Ole Miss defensive line is absolutely loaded prospects and youngsters. I mean, they showed it against Georgia just a few weeks ago. You mentioned David Walker as an extra name to know. Anyone else you want to add to the list or your guys to keep an eye on?
Oof. I will throw one name in. I don't think he declares, but probably say for next year's draft, Quandarius Robinson, Alabama edge rusher. And I'm not breaking any ground saying that Alabama edge rusher is going to be good, but he's skinny right now. He's just undersized. But the bend this guy has at 6'5", 240 is awesome to watch. And just if he can get some strength behind him, I think that guy's going to be a first rounder. But I bet he comes back to school. So there's your 2026 first rounder, Quandarius Robinson.
Are you stealing that from your coworker, Rick Spielman? Because is
Rick hyping him up?
Yes, he mentioned him on this show just a few weeks ago. That was one of his guys.
I did not. Okay, well, there we go.
Because Rick was on campus at Bama, and he suggested that he's going to run in the 4.5s. And that he's got 36-inch arms, that he's going to just break all those freak show type of records when it comes to measurables. So, I figured you guys were in cahoots or something.
No,
talking about it.
I did not see that episode, unfortunately. Sorry, Rick.
No, that's fine.
Stealing your guy.
I don't expect you to listen to get other people's takes. You got to stay laser. That's what I do. I don't watch other NFL shows. You got to stay laser focused on your own, so you don't get swayed.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot. We'll be talking a lot about defensive linemen. There's so many guys to watch that I think can get at least in the first 3 rounds. There's a slew of edges and interior defensive linemen in this draft. We had a few mailbag Discord questions, so we went to the Check the Mic Discord. We'll just run through these quickly. From Ward Off the Sins of This Team. I think that's a Giants fan. Someone just yearning for a new quarterback for the Giants. He's asking, is Cam Ward the type of player that you need to sit for a year?
I don't think so, honestly. I mean, he's
played a lot of football.
Yeah,
at every level.
5 years of football, 3 different stops. So, multiple different OCs and offenses that he's had to learn. And while he plays a brand of football that, I think, I won't say to the untrained eye, but you watch him, you watch Caleb Williams, you could be like, oh, you see some similarities in how they play the game. But I do think that the difference being Ward almost goes to the out of structure stuff when he knows he has that ability to. Caleb, it was he went to it as a necessity. Ward will scramble around when it's okay, I have the time, but he wants to play within structure. He wants to work from the pocket in the offense, but then when things break down, he has to do it. So I think Ward Yeah, I think he could definitely start right away. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't put him out there. Now, footwork, other things of that nature, like, yeah, you'd like him to clean up, but I think that stuff can happen a little more on the fly. Ideally, I'm of the opinion you want to sit everyone out the gate. Just we discussed this last time I think I came on, but
Yeah.
I do think if you have to start him right away, he's not going to look like a fish out of water.
Okay, so from I'm Moyo, I think I got that right. He's asking about that edge class. We already mentioned one of these guys. A better physical talent, Michael Williams from Georgia or Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. Where would they rank over the last 5 years?
The last 5 years. That's
just as physical talents here.
Yeah, it's so tough because they're even between the two of them, two big edge rushers. They're two like different types of guys. I would probably give the nod to Michael for freakiness, pure like NFL projectable freakiness, because of the lateral agility I talked about. Like his feet are better. Stewart's, I mean, at his size and at his height, his explosiveness, his get off is probably a little bit freakier in terms of just like linearly get upfield at 290 and get through a guy. But I think Williams even has the longer arms, a little bit twitchier laterally. So like I would trend more towards his type of athleticism when projecting to the next level.
Yeah, I think Williams
5 years.
I think Williams is going to have some fans once they see the offseason, the testing, and everything that he puts together.
And so Stewart, I mean, even the last 5 years, I think this class has some real freaks. James Pierce is insanely explosive.
Have we talked about him, by the way? I feel like he moves like a receiver. That I don't think I've seen edge rushers move the way James Pierce from Tennessee actually moves.
Yeah. Again, he's another guy where I think him and Michael Williams, how I'd put it is, it's a matter of time. It's not about if, it's about when. They will get there. They're too gifted not to, unless they don't put in the work. But like they're too physically gifted not to turn into productive NFL players. It's just how much time you got. So those two guys are just different caliber of athletes and I think we're seeing the NFL today, athletes are winning more so than ever. You just get the guy in the system and find out a way to deploy him. So comparing year on year, who's like the freakiest is difficult. To me, Micah Parsons is still, for going all the way back 5 years, that's the guy who I was just like, I've never seen anything like that in a football field. So he's probably still one over that time span. But after that, gosh, I mean, the guys that are coming out this year are going to be up there. Dallas Turner was freaky. Chop Robinson was freaky last year. Obviously, Trayvon Walker. But I think these guys are in that mix, whether it's Abdul Carter, whether it's James Pierce, or whether it's Michael Williams. Shamar Stewart, I don't think quite like you've seen big, linear, explosive dudes. Who's this name? Lucas Van Ness comes to mind, where it's like, okay, you got that to your game. Now you need a little bit more. But the three I mentioned at the top, I think are up there, or pretty high up there in terms of just what they bring to the table.
All right, from Real Con Man, he says, he's asking, is there a consensus cornerback one in the draft outside of Travis Hunter?
I think Will Johnson will probably be that guy. Now, I haven't looked too much into who else other people have there, but like Benjamin Morrison could have been, but he got hurt. Some other guys could have been that got hurt. Siobhan Ravel got hurt. So, yeah, I think it'll be Will Johnson.
Morrison and Ravel, both the next two, it goes consensus board outside of Travis Hunter. It's Will Johnson, then Benjamin Morrison, Siobhan Ravel. Both Morrison and Ravel hurt out for the season. So, yeah, I think it felt like they would be the competition. We'll see what their recovery looks like. But, yeah, I think Will Johnson, for most people, would be the consensus non-Travis Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. We don't always get Packers ownership on this show, but since you are part of the ownership group in Green Bay, from Dispat, which cornerback will Packers fans fall in love with that the team will then pass on in the first round? I didn't know that is this an annual thing for Packers fans?
They do seemingly just like never draft the guy you think they should. They have their own board, and the obvious guy who's at that point in time, they always just kind of like go the other way. I think Siobhan Ravel is that guy this year, if there is one, just because, I mean, he's a scheme fit for what they're doing now. Big, long, great ball skills, that outside sort of corner that they're missing. But they don't draft injury guys, unfortunately. They just have not been a franchise that takes those kind of risks. And so a guy coming off an ACL might be off the board entirely. So I don't see it happening. But that's the guy that, if he was fully healthy, I would have loved him in Green Bay.
I haven't been able to watch as much Tetairoa Davis from Arizona this year versus last year, but coming into the season, I was a fan of his. I thought he hasn't really risen this year necessarily, projected to go maybe in the second, but he's one of those guys that I had my eye on coming in. Not sure where you land on Davis. He's got pretty good size, though.
Yeah, he's a scheme fit. I think he'd be great. They just need a guy who can win at the line of scrimmage, man. They don't. I can go on for days about the corners right now, especially after last game when Jair went out and it was just like slim pickings. But they need a guy like that who can just disrupt on the outside. They don't have it right now.
You're an owner, man. You gotta make a move there. Go make some moves. Well, Mike, always appreciate it. Love talking draft with you. Always appreciate your insight. One of my go-tos when I actually do want to get outside information on the draft. I don't look at most. I look at you and a handful of others. Remind everybody where they can see you every single week.
Yeah, go check it out on YouTube. It's NFL and CBS is the channel, and Pushing the Pile is the podcast. So Monday through Thursday. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again next time. Check the mic.